Well, good afternoon, everyone. This is my first ever live stream, so please bear with me if anything goes awry, anything goes wrong. It is my first time. I've got a monitor down here, which I think is working. What's kind of creepy is I can now see me on a screen down here. So I put it up to the vote, and today we're going to be making an old-fashioned, but also because an old-fashioned is, dare I say it, a slightly boring drink, a bit too simple. I shouldn't have really included it as an option, I guess. Right after the old-fashioned, we're going to be building a Pisco sour. So two very different drinks, one very boozy, very spirit-forward, and then one much more light, more refreshing. As you can see behind me, I've got a little bit of a home bar, keeping me company throughout this lockdown. This wasn't bought because of the lockdown, right? I've not been hoarding before anyone tries to report me. I've got a real fascination, real love affair with classic cocktails, craft cocktails, that kind of thing. So this bar has been a couple of years in the making now. Interestingly enough, I don't tend to drink much at home, but with me being on lockdown, having spent the last sort of 7 days locked up in the house, I thought I'd treat myself, and I think everyone should treat themselves. At the end of a week like this, I think we all deserve a drink. So, to start with, I'm going to be talking you through how to make the drink and some basic principles behind making drinks in general. Now, the first thing I want to start off with is the old shaken or stirred. Anyone familiar with James Bond will have heard the phrase vodka martini, shaken not stirred, or vodka martini rather, shaken not stirred. You don't get a choice, right? Ian Fleming wasn't a bartender. To shake a martini is to get it wrong. You do not get a choice. There's a simple rule of thumb, a simple clear-cut way of knowing whether you should be shaking or stirring a drink. The rule of thumb is simply this. If the drink contains any citrus, any dairy, any kind of juice, so pineapple juice, eggs, milk, cream, lemon juice, lime juice, whatever, anything like that, you must shake it. And that's because those are kind of ingredients that need encouragement to combine. Any other drink, such as a Negroni, an old-fashioned, a Vieux Carré, a martini, you would stir those drinks. And that's because these are drinks that are quite boozy and have quite a, almost like a velvety mouthfeel, quite a nice luxurious mouthfeel. To shake a drink like a martini or an old-fashioned would just agitate it too much. It would leave potentially over-dilution in the drink, and it would leave a kind of a faux effervescence. So when you look at the surface of the drink, you're going to lose that nice glassy, smooth texture, and instead it'll be replaced by a faux kind of aerated effervescence. So with that in mind, we've actually got a stirred, the old-fashioned, and a shaken drink, which will be the Pisco sour. The Pisco sour contains citrus and dairy, so it's going to be really important to shake that. If I was to shake my old-fashioned, like I said, I'm going to risk over-diluting it, and I'm going to introduce a slightly aerated mouthfeel, which would completely betray the style of drink. So with that in mind, let's start with the old-fashioned. You need a mixing glass. A mixing glass is a sort of specialist piece of bar equipment, but obviously, as you can see, it's not that special. So if you don't have a mixing glass at home, you could use almost anything else, an old jam jar, an old coffee pot. I do have a mixing glass, so I'm going to be using that. And I'm not going to be making a bourbon old-fashioned. So a bourbon old-fashioned is the variety that people are most used to. I much prefer rye whiskey in an old-fashioned. Much more punchy, a little spicier, and just makes an overall, for me at least, more interesting drink. So my base is not going to be bourbon, it's going to be some Rittenhouse bottled in bond, Rittenhouse 100 rye. Other ingredients in this drink will be just simply bitters and sugar. It's a very simple drink. So the next pro tip I'm going to tell you is when we're adding ingredients to a cocktail, always start with your cheapest ingredient first. Now, while I grab some more utensils, I'll explain exactly why that is. If you're making a cocktail, and if you're not used to making cocktails, or maybe it's a brand new recipe or spec that you've never done before, there's every chance you're going to get it wrong. I know I've personally messed up quite a lot of cocktails. What would be really heartbreaking is if I poured 60 millilitres or 2 ounces of whiskey and then got something wrong. I'm going to pour that in the bin, right? That's several pounds worth of wastage. If instead I pour my cheapest ingredients first, anything I get wrong will be much cheaper to waste, much cheaper to throw away. So as a general rule, always pick the ingredients that you can afford to lose the most of. Ideally, we wouldn't lose anything, of course, but what you want to do is start with the ingredient you can afford to lose the most of. I made some Demerara syrup just before coming on the live stream. This stuff is dirt cheap, right? So I can make that really easily, really quickly. I can replace this. Bitters, not necessarily cheap, but we're using such small quantities that they're a candidate for the first ingredient. This stuff, however, especially buying in the UK, comes at a bit of a premium. I don't want to risk wasting any of this. So, the recipe or specification for my old-fashioned starts with 1 dash of aromatic bitters. So this is the Bitter Truth aromatic bitters. If you can't get hold of this, don't worry. The Angostura bitters, which I'm also going to be using, is really ubiquitous. You can find this in almost any grocery store. So if you don't have the aromatic bitters, don't stress. Simply going to go for 1 dash of this. The next actual pro tip I want to share with you is you'll notice that I don't have any ice in this mixing glass. That's purely because the moment the ice hits any liquid, the race is on. That drink is diluting, your ingredients are beginning to bathe in the ice. So what we want to do is add the ice at the latest stage possible. This means that I can leave this, I can talk to you on live stream while these ingredients are sitting in there. I'm not losing any dilution, I'm not over diluting, sorry, by having the ice in the mixing glass. So always, where possible, add your ice very, very last. What I'm going to deem my next cheapest ingredient is my Angostura. So it's 1 dash of the aromatic bitters. Now it's going to be 2 dashes of the Angostura bitters. So now I'm at a point where I've got less than 5 milliliters of liquid in there. If anything goes wrong, this is a very cheap drink to have waste so far. I need to just grab a bar spoon, or rather a measuring spoon. A lot of recipes will call for a bar spoon of syrup or a bar spoon of something. The problem is a bar spoon is a non-standard measure. This comes in around 2.8 milliliters. There's nothing saying that all bar spoons are the same size. So what you're after is a set of decent measuring spoons. So the next thing I want to put in my old-fashioned is going to be 5 milliliters or 1 teaspoon of Demerara syrup. Now this Demerara syrup, really simple to make. Get some Demerara sugar. And by volume, you want 2 parts sugar to 1 part water. So in here, I think I've got, I think it's 100 ml of water, 200 grams of sugar, and just stir those down on in a hot pan until you're left with a really viscous syrup. So Demerara syrup is just 2 parts sugar to 1 part water by volume. Adding 5 ml of that. And then, like I said, this is a mega simple drink, so I'm already on the final ingredient. At this point, I'm going to add 60 milliliters, or for the Americans, that's 2 ounces of rye whiskey. If you want to use bourbon, go ahead, but like I said, my preference is for rye. Like I said, this is a stirred drink because it's got all clear ingredients. Any drink that's 100% alcohol, or doesn't contain any, or basically only contains clear ingredients, is a candidate for a stirred drink, right? We're not going to shake this. All my ingredients are in there now. The next thing is to stir it down. So I'm going to nip and get some ice. I've got my ice right next to me. But like I said, the important thing is cheapest ingredient first. That makes it's a cheaper mistake to make. And don't add your ice till the last minute. Right, back in a second. So I'm working here with very dry ice, and what I mean by that is it doesn't have like a melted sheen on it. You can't really get it from the live stream, but when you talk about bar ice, you can have wet ice, which is kind of a bad thing, or dry ice. And dry ice is the kind of stuff that, if these ice cubes are small enough, would freeze to my finger. That's really good ice to work with. It's going to dilute much more consistently, much more slowly. If you're in a position where you end up with wet ice, ice that's started slightly melting and it's got like a watery sheen on the cubes, that's going to dilute much quicker, so you need to adjust your stirring accordingly. Okay. When it comes to stirring a drink, we're not actually looking to agitate any of the ice cubes. We're just looking to push the ice cubes around the mixing glass. So what I'm not going to try and do, what I don't want to do, is sort of try and just muddle this around. All I'm really doing is getting the back of the bar spoon pressed against the face or the inner wall of the glass and just moving things around, right? So I'm keeping contact at all times, the spoon against the glass, and I'm just nudging those ice cubes around. A really, really good friend of mine, a guy called Andy Cochran, he's a web developer now, but he used to be a very, very good bartender. And he taught me a trick, which is basically, imagine the top of your bar spoon is fastened by a piece of string vertically to the ceiling above you, right? And the string is only just long enough. So this part of the bar spoon should remain as still as possible while the rest of it rotates beneath you. Now, if you're going to hold the mixing glass while you're stirring, the key thing here is don't grip the glass, right? If you grip the glass, the heat from your hand is just fighting against the cold from the ice. Have as small a contact point as possible, and all we're doing is nudging that the ice around the mixing glass. We're not trying to agitate anything, we're not trying to aerate anything. We're certainly not mashing things around, we are just moving the ice slowly around the edge of the glass. With this being very dry ice and a very boozy drink, it will need quite a lot of dilution. If the drink is too boozy, we call that a bit too hot, we can just keep stirring down. But it's important to remember you can never remove dilution, so check early and check often. So what I'm going to do now is just dash a small amount of that. That's pretty much there. That's close enough that I can just leave this for one moment while I grab a glass. Here's one I chilled earlier, a bit of ice. Now, unfortunately, I don't have any gorgeous, big, crystal clear ice cubes in the house at the moment. So I'm just working with fairly standard freezer ice cubes. So I'm ready to pour this now. Traditionally, you would use a julep strainer for this, and a julep strainer looks like this. It's kind of tricky to use a julep strainer when you don't have a lot of ice in the glass, so I'm going to leave this for now. I'm not going to bother with my julep. Make life a little easier for myself. This is a Hawthorne strainer. You've probably seen these any bar you've been to before. Hawthorne strainer, simply place it over the mixing glass so the spout is still available to us, and we're going to get that poured out. There we have one old-fashioned. To garnish this, I've done with most of this now. To garnish this, I can just get an orange twist. This garnish isn't going to look too fancy because it would just take too long while you're all watching. A twist of orange and a twist of lemon. Now, lemons, it's key when you're making cocktails, especially for garnish. Purchase unwaxed lemons. Waxed lemons, they're not going to express the citrus in the way we want them to. So if you can, get hold of unwaxed lemons. And then all I need to do is express some of the citrus from the peel over the glass. There's a saying, right? So first taste is with the eyes, second taste is with the nose. So with the sort of freshly expressed peel, just sort of rub around the edge of the glass. It means whoever's drinking this drink will get a really nice citrus aroma. And the same deal with this slice of orange. And there we go. Classic old-fashioned. Cheers. One thing I forgot to mention, a key thing with the old-fashioned, you'll hear a lot of rumour about how an old-fashioned should be made. A lot of people say that you need to build it in the glass, and while you absolutely can build an old-fashioned in the glass, if you're building more than one, that's going to be time-consuming. Another bit of misinformation about the old-fashioned is almost the ritual that goes behind it. You know, muddle the sugar into the mixing glass, stir it 50 times clockwise and 50 times anti-clockwise. Well, this is just hyperbole. This is just hearsay. Making an old-fashioned, you can just use pre-made syrup, not pre-purchased. Make your own syrup. An old-fashioned isn't and doesn't have to be a very complicated drink. So there we go. We've learned the principles, when you should shake and when you should stir a drink. Pour your cheapest ingredient first, and put the ice in as late as possible. That is actually remarkable. Really happy with that. I'm just going to rinse out one of the bits of equipment, and then we're going to move on to the Pisco Sour. This is going to be a shaken drink. Okay, Pisco Sour. I haven't had a Pisco Sour in a very, very long time. So for this drink, I can get rid of this stuff. The main backbone of the drink is the spirit Pisco. It's a Peruvian, it's effectively a brandy. So it's going to be backed by Pisco, and I'm going to make mine with a mixture of both lemon and lime juice, which I've already pre-prepared. I'm honestly hoping, expecting this weekend that I'm going to get through enough of this bar that I need to pre-batch some of my citrus. If not, you can make it per drink, right? No need to worry about pre-preparing too much stuff. So, shake and drink means I'm going to need my tins. The key here is, or rather the key with my tins is, they are both metal tins. You've no doubt seen in bars in the past, one tin being metal and the other is actually a glass. That's a Boston shaker. These are adequate, these are fine. But really what you want is two tins. These are way nicer to work with. The reason for that is, at some point, inevitably, the glass half of a Boston shaker is going to break, right? It's just a bit more risky. Another thing is, because these are both made of metal, when they cool down when you're shaking your drink, they will both contract at the same rate. It means you get a really nice seal, right? It's very unlikely these are going to come undone by accident. So, Pisco Sour. Again, as before, I'm going to pour my cheapest ingredient first. In this case, I'm deeming that cheap ingredient simple syrup. So I'm not using the Demerara from before. Simple syrup is even simpler. For this, what we're going to do is combine equal parts by weight boiling water and superfine caster sugar. So all I did for this is boiled a kettle of water, poured 150 ml into a mixing, into a jug, then poured in 150 grams of sugar and just stir it until it's all dissolved. That's simple syrup, dead cheap, dead easy to make. Same principle as before then. We're not going to add ice until the last possible moment, and also we're going to pour the cheapest ingredient first. When you've got your mixing glasses, you've got a big one and a little one. Sorry, not mixing glasses, your shaking tins. So even though these are Japanese tins, the concept is American, and these are called 2818s because this one's 28 ounces, this is 18 ounces. When you're using mixing tins, shaking tins, pour your ingredients into the smaller one, into the 18. Bit of an obscure number, but for this we are going to be using 22.5 ml of sugar, right? So about 20 to 25 ml of sugar, depending on how sweet you want things. And that simple syrup just goes straight into the small mixing tin, sorry. We're going to chase that with, in fact, you know what, I've had an idea. I said, in fact, perfect example of this. Cheapest ingredient is safe to waste. I haven't necessarily messed this drink up, but I want to show you a bit of a surprise. So I'm going to dunk this and start again. One thing about the Pisco Sour is it actually contains egg white. So what I'm going to do, because an egg's a volatile ingredient, you know, I could crack the yolk by accident or I could leave some shell in there. Even though this isn't the cheapest ingredient, what I don't want to do is pour most of my ingredients and then drop a big chunk of eggshell in there. So all I'm going to do is add egg white to this mixing tin. Now, depending on whether you're into the idea of raw egg, this may not be a drink for you. There are also some medical or health concerns with it. So you could opt to have a Pisco Sour without the egg white. I'm going to save the egg yolk because I might make a carbonara this evening. And we don't like waste. So yeah, egg white in there. So that's one egg white per drink that you're building. Now I'm going to go again, this time with the syrup. 22.5 ml syrup. Then we are going to have 15 ml each of lemon and lime juice. So 15 ml is a tablespoon. So 15 ml of that. And 15 ml of my lime juice. Next up, we're going to want that Pisco. And this is 60 ml. So you notice both of these drinks had 60 ml of the base spirit in there. And both of these drinks, we added that spirit last. So even though they've got the same amount of base spirit, the Pisco Sour has enough other ingredients, it's going to seem way less boozy. Next pro tip I want to give you, if you're ever shaking an egg white cocktail, basically egg white is just pure protein. And what we want to do is we want to achieve a really nice emulsification of that egg white. In order to achieve this, we are first going to give it what is called a dry shake, a shake without any ice in there. What this will do is allow the egg white, without being cooled down too much, just to start to emulsify. Now, there are two kind of issues with this. One, without any ice in there, there's nothing to agitate the drink, so it'll be a lot harder to actually shake this without ice in there because the ice actually provides a lot of emulsification for us. The second thing is, with no ice, this drink is not going to cool down on its first shake. An issue there is these are not going to seal quite as well. So this is the one time where you might run into trouble shaking a drink with a dry shake, is that these will not seal perfectly the first time round. So I'm just preparing you for the eventuality that I covered in an unmixed Pisco sour. A little pro tip here, anytime you're mixing an egg white drink, and we want that emulsification, I just mentioned we're going to lose that because of a lack of ice. What you can do is take the spring off of your strainer and drop that into the tins. Now I'm going to need this strainer in a second, so what I'm going to do is borrow my spring from just a little hand whisk. If I pull this spring off and just drop it in the tins, that is going to begin to provide some of the emulsification, some of the frothing action that the ice is going to miss out on, or that we're going to miss out on. So you've got your ingredients in the smaller of the two tins. Just pour and clamp that together, and all this should really take is a little dunk. I'm going to shake the bejesus out of this, and hopefully when we open it up, it'll be a really frothy but undiluted and unchilled drink. It's really important at this point to keep a real firm grasp on these tins, because they are not sealing, right? However, taking these tins apart should be really easy. With the big palm of your sort of weak hand, I guess, just hold as much of this joint as you can, the straight back. With the palm or the ball of this hand, I guess, that's all it takes, and that's popped apart. That'll start to froth up really, really well. I'm going to fish out this spring and just chuck it in the sink. Return my ingredients to the small tin. Now it's time for ice. Put a generous amount of ice into the large tin. And again, with the ingredients in the small tin, pour them together, clamp it shut. What's going to happen now is with the ice in there, we're going to begin to get the dilution that we need. Well, as soon as you start shaking these tins, they're going to get remarkably cold. That is a good sign, obviously, but this is going to cause the tins to seal really well. In fact, these are now so well sealed that in theory, you shouldn't need two hands. And now it's time to serve this cocktail. So the previous cocktail was in a tumbler. It's a nice kind of classy sort of glass for that kind of drink, for an old fashioned. We're going to pour this into a coupe. I'm going to fine strain this drink to make sure any of the ice shards are removed. So what that means is, as well as using my Hawthorne strainer, and then pass it through a fine strainer. You can see how the egg whites come up really smooth, really creamy. And now we have an ungarnished Pisco sour. The last thing to do is to add a little bit of something to this drink. What I think I'm going to do is get my bitters from the previous drink and a cocktail stick. Come back to that in a second. I'm really hoping this works out. 1, 2, 3 drops of bitters. If I drag my cocktail stick through the center of those 3 drops, 3 love hearts. Perfect. There we have a Pisco Sour served in a coupe, a shaken egg white drink. Right, I guess that's all for now. I hope that has been of some interest, at least helped to pass some time during these crazy days on lockdown. But the weekend starts now, and cheers. Thank you very much.